All right, so we're going to go through the notes on section 7. These are for midpoint and distance formula, or actually section 1.7. All right, so if you're finding the midpoint on a number line, right? So if I've got this number line right here, and let's say I've got, I've got 7 and I've got 15. So if I wanted to find the midpoint between those two, I would add them together and divide it by 2, because it's going to give you the middle of those 2 points. So that's 22 divided by 2, which is 11, which is exactly in the middle between those 2 points. So when you're looking on a number line, you add them together, and then you divide by 2. All right. So for the midpoint formula, here's the midpoint formula here, and you'll see this when you're doing the work, is x1 plus x2 divided by 2 over y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Just a note, these two things, when you see an x1 and an x2, those just mean 2 different points. So remember that when you see x1 and x2, that just means 2 different points. Same with y1 and y2 when they're down low like that. So we're going to find this midpoint for a line segment of PQ that joins the points -3, 3, and 1, 0. So I'm going to take those and I'm going to put them into my formula that's right up here. So I've got my x's, which is -3 plus 1, because I'm using these two right here, okay? And then I'm going to divide those by 2. All right, now I'm actually going to do both of these points at the same time just to make it easier, and you can do this too. And I'm going to take my next ones, my y's, and I'm going to have, I got to end a parenthesis right there. Beginning of parenthesis, now I have my y coordinates, which is 3 plus 0 over 2, right? And so if I just simplify, do my math, I've got -3 plus 1, which is -2 over 2, comma, right? And then I have, oops, I'm sorry, I have a parenthesis here that I shouldn't. So don't have those parentheses because those are the 2 points you're going to have. And then I also have 3 over 2. Now you have to simplify these points to make sure you get them right. So this first one right here simplifies -2 over 2 to be -1, 3 over 2. So this is the midpoint right here between these two endpoints. All right. You can also do this as you can have, if it gives you an endpoint and you already have a midpoint, you can work backwards and figure out what you're missing. So this is done a little bit differently. So we've got the midpoint of segment CD is -2, 1, and one endpoint is -5, 7. So what you're going to do is you're going to figure out how this works. So over here, because here's my equation again, which I'll write down. And I'm going to simplify it a little bit more. I'm going to do these separately this time because it's a little bit easier to see. So I have x1 plus x2 all over 2. And that's going to equal the midpoint, the x midpoint, okay? Sorry, I should use the proper one. We'll do big M, my bad. All right, so I'm going to plug in what I know and then find out what I don't. So I happen to know x1, okay, because it's given to me right here, which is an endpoint, so that's -5, right? Plus, I don't know x2, and over 2 stays the same, and I know that that equals the x coordinate of the midpoint, which in this case happens to be -2. All right, and what you do here is you solve for x, just like you would any other equation. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, I'm going to get, because those twos cancel, I get negative 5 plus x2 equals negative 4, right? And if I keep moving forward, if I were just solving that equation regularly, right, I would add 5 to both sides. And I would get that x2 equals negative 4 plus 5, which is 1. Okay, but I'm not done yet because I've only found one coordinate of one endpoint. So I have to do the same exact process, but for the y. All right, so I'm gonna make a line here. I kind of didn't give myself much room, so we'll see what we'll figure it out. All right, so I've got my y coordinate, which is going to be 7, right? 7 plus y2 over 2 equals the y midpoint, which in this case is going to be 1. Okay, I did the same exact thing here as I did up here with plugging in what I knew, and I'm trying to find what I don't know. Although I will admit I drew this part horribly. Let's try that again. That's a little better. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. Now I'm going to get, those go away. 7 plus y2 equals 2. Subtract 7 from both sides. And I get y2 equals negative 5. So I'm not done yet because when you put these in MyMathLab, it's going to be asking for the point, which is an x comma y. So it's going to be in this format, right? Comma in the middle. So my x coordinate that I found was 1, and my y coordinate that I found was negative 5. And that is the other endpoint, and that is my final answer. All right? So last thing we'll do is the distance formula. Distance formula is just knowing how to plug in what and knowing where to plug it in. The biggest mistake that students make with the distance formula is using the wrong formula. They forget the minus inside there. And that's a very common mistake. So I'm going to plug in my x's, plug in my y's, and then solve. All right. So I get d equals the square root of a whole bunch of things. So I'm going to plug in my x's, right? I've got x2, which remember that means it's the second x. I'm sorry, the second x, not the first one. You got to keep them in the same order. So I'm going to use the 1 first. So I have 1 minus my other x coordinate, which is 2. And then I square that. Plus, and then I also have to do the same thing with my y's. I use the second coordinate, not the first. So I have negative 4, which comes from right here. Okay? Minus negative 5 squared. All right? So don't forget, if it's a negative, you have to include the negative. If I keep simplifying, I get d equals the square root of 1 minus 2 is negative 1 squared plus, and then negative 4 minus negative 5 is going to be 1. Because in math, 2 wrongs make a right. 1 squared, right? And so I'm going to square both those things. So d equals square root of negative 1 squared, which is 1, plus 1. So that means d equals the square root of 2. And that is a fine answer, or is that an okay answer for what we're doing? All right, so that's the end of the notes. Go ahead and work on assignment 1.7, and good job. Thanks.